In this video, I'm going to model the folded circle construction using Web Sketchpad. I'll start by constructing a circle, indicating where the center should go, and a point on its circumference. Now I'm going to construct a point in the circle's interior and a point on the circle's circumference. I'll label these points as A, B, and C. Now for the folded circle construction, we're going to fold point C onto point B to create a crease. So what will it mean for us using this Web Sketchpad environment to create such a crease? Well, that crease is the perpendicular bisector of the segment connecting points B and C. So I'll tap on the perpendicular bisector tool, and I see that my preview here is showing a segment that's glowing as well as its perpendicular bisector. I'm going to match that glowing segment to CB, and here I have the perpendicular bisector of CB, which is the crease line that is formed when C is folded onto B. And here I can see all these different crease lines for different locations of point B. Now I'd really like to see all those locations at once. So I'm going to use the new Trace widget to trace this perpendicular bisector as I drag C around the circle. First, though, I think I am going to make this line just a wee bit thinner using my Style widget. Okay, now I'm ready to trace. I am going to trace this perpendicular bisector, and we see that Web Sketchpad makes that object glow so that we know what is being traced. Well, now that I know it's being traced, I'm going to turn off Traced Objects Glow. I no longer need to see that. Now if I drag point C, I quickly generate a plethora of crease lines, and I see that it looks like these creases form an ellipse with foci at A and B. Now I'd like to try doing the same experiment for a different location of point B. So first I'll erase traces. And now I'm going to briefly disable tracing so that when I drag point B to a new location, say over here, I'm not also tracing this perpendicular bisector. Now I can enable tracing again and drag point C. And again, it looks like I obtain an ellipse. On page 2, we see the same construction, but now when I drag point B, the crease lines move in response to the location of point B. This is something, at least for now, that I can't construct from scratch in Web Sketchpad. And you should check out what happens when B sits at locations, for instance, either on the circle's circumference or outside the circle itself. Here on the third page of my web sketch, we begin to see why this construction generates an ellipse. And here again I have point C, and that's folded onto B. And I've also constructed the radius from point A to point C and marked a point D where that radius intersects my crease line. Why does point D trace an ellipse? That's a good question to explore using the distance definition of an ellipse. Finally, on the remaining page of my sketch, we can model the folded rectangle construction. In that construction, you start with a rectangular sheet of paper, and you take one edge of that paper, which I'll represent with a line, and you place a point not too far from that edge, and you fold that any point on the edge of the paper, for instance, this point right here, point A, onto point B. And as before, we can model that crease line by first constructing a segment from A to B, and then making the perpendicular bisector. And I'll leave it to you to do the rest to see what conic section is formed when A is folded onto point B for different locations of A along the edge of the paper.